Okay, good afternoon. I'm doing something a little bit different today. I wanted to discuss some common Purim related shilas, shalach manos, and in general preparing for Yom Tif and preparing for Purim. There are a few different topics we want to discuss. Really, each one could be a share for itself, but we'll try to get through as much as we can. First shaila is a very common shaila regarding toiveling dishes that are meant to be given as shalach manos. We all know that there's a mitzvah in the Torah to toivel dishes that are purchased from a guy. Min metal kalim have to be tabled. Rabbonim glass kalim also have to be tabled. However, the shaila is when you table kalim and you're not going to be using them for yourself. You're tabling, you purchase them only with the intent to give them away to someone else as a gift. Are you obligated to table them? Are you supposed to definitely not table them and leave them for the recipient to table? If you do table them, does it help? And so on. So, just to give a little bit of background, this scenario of giving kalim as a gift is not discussed in Shulchan Aruch. However, the Beis Yosef tells us in Yarden Sim Kuf Adin from the Agoy Ashri. The Agoy Ashri says as follows: if a yid buys a keli from a guy, not to use it as a kli suda. Only kli suda need to be titled as need to be tabled as part of the mitzvah of tefillas kalim. If you buy kalim that are not for klei that are meant to be used for something else, there's no mitzvah of tefillah. The Gemara already tells us in the Avodah Zarah hey, scissors that are meant to be used to cut wool don't need to be tabled. So if a yid buys kalim from a guy that are klei schayra, he buys them not to use them as a klei suda, he buys them to sell them as merchandise. So he doesn't have to table them. It's pasha. Now, what happens if that yid goes and lends these kalim to another yid? So now, the first yid doesn't have to table them because he didn't buy them as klei suda. He purchased these kalim as klei schayra. The second yid doesn't have to table them because he received these kalim from a yid. So that's the din of that goy sashri. The truth is, says the Beis Yosef, that according to this, it would mistaber that even if the second yid bought it from the first yid, he wouldn't have to table them. But he said, no, that's that already halacha we say. You don't have to, since it originally came from a guy, then you do have to table them. Okay, and that's based on this. This is how the Mechaber Paschal in Shulchan Aruch in Yerdeh Simin Kufchaf Siv Ches. Somebody who borrows or rents a keli from a guy, Einetan Tvila. Doesn't have to table it. But if a yid bought kalim from a guy, and he lent it to another yid, then it does have to be tabled. Because it already became obligated in tefillah in the hands of the first yid, even though he didn't table it. There is an opinion that says, which we mentioned is the Agoy Sashri, if the first yid did not buy it letzerich suda, he did not buy it as a kli suda, but he bought it to cut papers with, or for schayra, as we mentioned, the first yid doesn't have to table it because he bought it as schayr. The second yid doesn't have to table it because he got it from a yid. However, this is the din of the Agoy Sashri. The Taz over there says, and the Shach says similar, but the Taz says it more barichas. He brings a Isser v'Heter. Isser v'Heter klal chav ches din pei zayin says, argues with that Agoy Sashri. He says, being that the first yid who bought it, yes, he bought it for klei schayr. But what if he would decide to use it as a kli suda? He would have to table it. You're not allowed to use kalim, even b'derech aray, even temporarily, even as a one-time thing, which perhaps kanamakim to mention that there's a very common misconception that you're allowed to use a keli one time without toiveling it. It's not true. The Rama also brings this over there in Simon Kufchav Siv Ches that even b'darachari it's also to use a keli without tvila, even one time, even the first time doesn't matter. So, being that the first yid who bought it technically does have a chiyuv tefillah, so therefore the second yid that bought it, even though he didn't tevel it because he's only using it for schera, but being that he does technically have a chiyuv tefillah and it was not tevel, so therefore the second yid does, who borrowed it from him, does need to tevel it. And based on this, the Shachan and Taz paskin that in such a scenario, of you walk into a Jewish-owned store that they sell kalim, and you borrow kalim from them, or you rent kalim from them, you should table it without a bracha, because the Isser Heter in this case says that technically the owner of the merchandise already became a Mechuyev in Tefillah. That Goyes Tashri says the owner of the merchandise did not become a Mechuyev in Tefillah because it's Klei Schayr. So therefore, it's a machlekes to table it without a bracha. So now, to apply this back to our shaila of kalim for shalach manos or kalim given as a gift. B'hashkafa rishayna, the same machlekes that we have, that goyes ashri and the iser v'heter by klei schera, we would have by klei matana. According to the Hagoyes Ashri, if I bought this keli not to use it as a kli suda, but to use it as a matana, I'm not chayiv in tefillah. B'meila, this only the b'meila, even when I give it away to someone else, it doesn't have to. It really doesn't have to table it. But if I did go and table it, I didn't accomplish anything. According to the Isser Hatter, since even if I wanted to use it b'derech aray, I would have to table it. So therefore, the chiyuv tefillah was already chal on me, and therefore I could table it. What's the halacha? We paskin me'ikar adin like the Goyes Ashri. Only the shachan and taz are cheshish l'chumra for the Isser Hatter. So b'meila, what comes out if we go with this mahalach? That somebody who buys kalim as a matana, as a gift, as shalach manos, not only they shouldn't table it, if they tabled it, they didn't accomplish anything, and therefore the recipient still would have to table it. And that is indeed one approach that is quite common in how to view kalim that are given as a matana or as a or as shalach manos. However, the truth is, if we think about it a little bit more, it's just my I'm not the only one who thinks this way, but just to explain my 2 cents. The comparison to Klei Schera is not really a good comparison. When I buy a keli for schera, I'm not buying it as a kli suda. By me, it's not it's a unit. It's a unit that's meant for sale. Unit number one, unit number two, unit number three. It doesn't matter. It's a means for me to how to make my parnasa. That doesn't make any difference to me that this is a kli suda or not. As a matter of fact, if somebody comes in to my store and wants to buy all these kalim and they also don't want to use it for a kli suda, they want to use it to smash to vent. I don't know, for whatever reason somebody could come up with that they want to use kalim that are not kli, so that doesn't make a difference to me. I'm using this to make a parnasa. This is not, in my perception, this is not a kli suda whatsoever. Masha ein, when I buy a keli to give it as a matana, it's a kli suda gomer. It's a regular kli suda that I bought it as. So what's the difference? If I'm going to use it, someone else is going to use it. The comparison to kli schera is not an accurate comparison. To put it in a different way, there are probably 3 or 4 different ways of saying this. Why does the Goyes Ashri say that when I buy a keli for schera, it doesn't become mechuyev in tefillah? Because there's a chesaron in the keli. This keli is not a kli suda; it's a kli schera. Masha'inkein, when I'm saying I'm buying a keli to give it as a gift, there's no chesaron in the keli. The keli is a kli suda. There's a chesaron in me. There's a chesaron in the purchaser, in the giver of the matana, that technically I'm not the owner, so I didn't become a chayv tefillah, or I'm not planning to use it. We don't have a makir that doesn't make you chayv tefillah. And adarabah, the Pesachim say later in the Siman Sif Tesvav, the Bar Hitiv, the Bar Goyla, the Chadash, others, that if I toivel a keli, if I go into your house and take your keli and I toivel it, also like tefillah, it's good. Why? It's not. I'm not mechuyev. It's not my keli. It doesn't matter. It's a mitzvah on the chefza that it has to be toivel. By the case of the Goyes Ashri, there's a chesaron in the chefza. It's not a kli suda. It's a kli schera. But in this case of a matana, there's no chesaron in the chefza. The chesaron is in the gavra. The Agoy Sashir never said that there was that when there's a chesaron in the gaver, you can't table it. And Paiskim who do talk about it say that Adar Abba also like tefillah. Okay, and in Lamdas there are a few other ways of being mechalik, and Paiskim discussed this. This is an animated discussion in today's Paiskim. Kedai to mention Shilas Tshuva's Divrei Tivya Siman Lamed Zayin from Rabbi Kasim of Shlita came out recently. He also has a tshuva about this, and he also halachi comes out with is also that Me'ikar Adin it does not have to be tabled. However, Lamaisa it is a machlekes, and there are many who say that the giver of the matana, the giver of the shalach manas, should not table it. B'meila, if you leave it for the recipient to table it, you're yaitza according to everyone. However, there are a few important caveats that we have to discuss, and there are a few important eitzis that some give that you could be yaitza according to everyone, and we'll discuss the milas and kasainas of those eitzis. Number one, like we said, there's a machlekes. Some say that a keli that you're giving as a matana is like a kli schera, and b'meila you can't table it, and tabling it accomplishes nothing. And there are those who say, and as I mentioned earlier, for what it's worth, Lani is that's what makes more sense, that the comparison to kli schera is not a valid comparison, and you could table it no problem. So even if you want to be machmer by metal kalim, by glass kalim. But when it comes to kalim that are porcelain, that are ceramic, that are plastic, that bechlal don't need to be tabled in Ikar Adin, that the tabling them is maximum a chumrah, maybe even less than that. But pashtos, everyone would agree that maybe not everyone, but there's would venture to say that efshel hakol b'shufi that the giver can table it. Again, if you don't want to and you want to leave it for someone else, it's something we'll discuss later. But when it's kedai to leave it for the recipient, when it's kedai dafka to table it yourself, if you want to, you can. But if it's necessary, or if you want to do someone a favor, and it's porcelain, ceramic, plastic, anything else that we table only al chumra, then for sure you can table them yourself. And then another thing, so the shiloh. When is this shiloh extremely common? Chabad houses. Chabad houses were giving out shalach manas to people with kelim. Now, put it like this: when you're giving a keli to somebody who's not from yet, and who's not tabling their kelim themselves, so davar pashat, not only you could table it for them, it's you can almost say you're mechuyev to table it for them. Otherwise, you're going to be machshel them with a keli that's not tabled. Now, really, the best way to stay is not to get into machlikas. Definitely with metal kalim, not to give up metal kalim in the shalach manis to somebody who you're chayshed that they're not going to table them, even if you ask them to, they're probably not going to table them. But if you're already in a situation where you're doing it, or if you're giving out mugs, or again ceramic, plastic, things like that, Zikr, everyone would agree that it's better for you to table them than to give it to them, and that they're for sure not going to table them. Because even if you want to say that it's totally in the machlikas hagoyis ashir and iser v'heter, so at least be saying on the iser v'heter. Mashenkin, if you give it, if you give it to them, they're for sure not going to table it. Befrat that, like we explained, yesh lemer that it's bechlal not totally in the machlikas hagoyis ashir iser v'heter, and everyone would agree that your tvila helps. So those are two exceptions, like I said, or I think that for sure you should table them. Porcelain, ceramic, plastic, and in a Chabad house situation where the recipient is not going to table in any way. However, in a regular situation where you're giving it out to uh, other from people, a shalach manas, who people are generally assume that they are going to table their kelim, so then, like I said, it's not kedai to get into machlekes. There are those who hold that the tefillah does not help, and leave it for the recipient to table. However, it's important to know that if you're leaving it for the recipient to table, you're not allowed to use it. So you can give it as a keli, but if you're putting food in it, then it's a davar pashat that you, the giver, not only could table it, you must table it. Otherwise, you can't use it. You can't put anything inside it. And by the way, putting a piece of paper, parchment paper, wrapping paper, doesn't help. If you're using the keli, it must be tabled. The Pesach mentioned two eitzes of what to do in such a case to be yaitza everyone. One of them is to, first of all, is to use the keli yourself, like just mentioned. So it might be practical if you're giving out three, four shalach manas and you have three or four mugs, you want to take a sip of water from each one, fine. But you're giving out 30, 40, 100, 200 shalach manas, it's not really practical. But if it is an Adar Abba, that definitely works, L'Kulei Alma. And the other Eitzah is to be mezaka the kalim to the recipient before you give it to them. And the way that works is you take a keli and you give it to someone else. Preferably, it should not be your wife or a member of your household. But the Yavid even whatever we have in the Erev Tafshil and other places, but the Yavid even works even with your wife or Barav B'Nei Agdalim or Ktanim that are not Smuchim al Shulchan, whatever. Ktanim that are not Smuchim al Shulchan is not really common nowadays, but Banav B'Nei Agdalim, even if there are some Smuchim al Shulchan and Ishtay, but the Yavid it works. And you give it to them, and they pick it up, and they make a kinyan on it on behalf of the recipient, and that works according to the principle of zachan la'adam shalei b'fanav, that I could be mezaka something for you, even without your knowledge. Now, again, with metal kalim that are mechuyev tefillah midiraisa, this has to be done with every individual keli with a specific recipient in mind. I'm being kind of this and to be mazaka it on behalf of Pliny ben Pliny, and then you put in shalach manas with their name on it. Like I said earlier, if you're giving three or four shalach manas, maybe you can do that. But if you're giving 100 shalach manas, it's not very practical. With glass kalim that are only mechuyev midirabanan, kol shekin with other kalim that are even less than derabanan, you could just do the whole box at the same time. I'm being mazaka this on behalf of whoever it ends up getting to, and by the time it gets up, it ends up getting to whoever it was supposed to get to, then lemafreya we say that you were kainit based on the principle of breira, but breira only works by derabanan. Breira doesn't work by deraisa, so therefore by metal kalim this etza wouldn't work. Okay, so that is that in regards to Tvilas Kalim. Another common shaila that comes up by baking for shalach and also general preparing for the sudis is hafrashas challah. So first of all, just a brief overview. I'm sure everyone knows, but a little bit of chazara. There's a mitzvah min HaTorah to be mafresh challah from a dough that is made with an amount of flour that is called chamesha servayim kemach, which is 43 and some odd beitzim, which in practical terms, what we do is from 2 pounds and 11 ounces of flour, we separate challah without a bracha. From 3 pounds and 11 ounces, we separate challah, sorry, I think it's a flour, separate challah with a bracha. I said it's a mitzvah min HaTorah. The truth is challah chutz la'aretz is derabanan. Nevertheless, there is a mitzvah to separate challah. Now, it's all very simple and straightforward. When you're making one big dough that has a shir challah, so you take challah from that dough, and easy, you burn the challah, whatever. Where it does get a little bit more complicated is by combining different types of flour and different types of dough. So, first of all, doughs of different flours can only be combined to create a shir challah on a certain very specific seder, certain types of grains that combine with other types of grains. It's not doesn't mamash happen every day. So I'm not going to get into the details, but it's important to know that if you're baking different doughs of wheat and oats and rye and spelt, that lav dafka do they all combine with one another in order to create a shir challah. So it's important to verify the details. The second thing is that even when you have multiple doughs that are all from the same grain, they only combine with one another if one is not makbid al taravasim. One is not makbid that they shouldn't become mixed together. However, if you have two different doughs and they're different flavors and you're makbid that they shouldn't mix, then they don't combine to become shir challah. So let's say you're making hamantashen, you're making chocolate hamantashen and cinnamon hamantashen, and you have one dough that is flavored with chocolate and it's less than a shir challah. One dough that is flavored with cinnamon and it's less than a shir challah. They don't combine based on the methods that are used to combine them, the shichar, serve sal, whatever it is. If they're different flavors and you're makbid al taravasim, which generally one is. That's why you're making them separate flavors. You don't want your chocolate and cinnamon to be smushed together. So that's a second. Uh, that's a second hara. Third hara is isa asui lechalik, and the reason I'm mentioning it is because somebody asked me last week that they heard in the shir that the Rav was giving a shir said that if you're making a dough, the shir challah, and the dough is meant to be distributed, then take challah without a bracha. Unless you're keeping a shir challah of bread for yourself. But if you're not keeping a shir challah of bread for yourself, even if there's a shir challah in the dough, but you're distributing the bread, then you take challah without a bracha. So, person asked me, what are my thoughts on this? So, the answer is the halachos like this: person who makes isa suya l'chalka batzik, a dough that is meant to be divided as dough, meaning before it's baked. Then, in that case, not only don't take challah, you take challah without a bracha, you don't take challah at all. Uh, for example, by a challah bake, if there's one large dough that has a shir challah, and you're ripping off small pieces of it to give to every single person to make their own challah, you don't separate challah from this dough because it's isa ha'asuya l'chalik. It's meant to be divided as dough, and therefore there is no chiyuv challah, unless again one person keeps to themselves an amount of dough that has a shir challah. So then you can separate challah. But if no single person retains a shir challah, so then there is no chiyuv of challah on this dough, and consequently, to take challah from this dough would be a bracha levatala. It's important to know by challah bakes. Uh, Certainly, with two people lechatchila have separate doughs. They can't combine, stick their doughs together, two different doughs, to make a shir challah, make a bracha, separate challah, take them apart. This is also a bracha levatala. That doesn't work. People give different eitzes how to get around this. They're all very schwach and very schwer, and it's at worst a bracha levatala. It's at best a bracha she'eina tzricha. Even if you come up with a way, different ways based on the tzemach tzedek and different tricks you can do to get around it. It's at best a bracha she'eina tzricha. Bracha she'eina tzricha is not a joke either. The Gemara tells us Menachas Brachshin Tzrichas an Avera Shechayzon Alav Me'erche HaMilchama. Brachshin Tzricha is not something to be taken lightly. And anyway, whether it's even a Brachshin Tzricha or Brachal Vatala Mamish is is questionable. So definitely not to make any kunsen or tricks, but the simple halacha is if one person has a shir challah, let's say by a challah bake, by a hamantash bake, um, say the shlucha has a large dough that has a shir challah, so she could take challah, make a bracha alad, everybody could answer amen, or she could honor someone else to take challah from the dough in her shlichus, but to divide the dough to others, every single person gets less than a shir challah, is not eisgehalten, and that doesn't work. However, the isa that's asuya lechalik achar afia, an isa that's meant to be distributed after it's baked. So you're baking a large dough of chalas, of hamantashen, of rugulach, whatever it is, doesn't make a difference. In order to give it out as shalach manos, and you're not keeping a shir challah for yourself, but when you're giving it out after it's baked. So the Beis Yosef in Yerden Simon Shin Chavav, excuse me, is medayik from Shainim, then in such a case, you take challah with a bracha. Because Isa, that's Asuya Lechalak Acher Afia, is not considered an Isa or Asuya Lechal. The Beis Yosef over there says L'chayra, it's mashma in the smag that the smag doesn't pass on this way, but that's Lemaisa, that's not the halacha. The halacha is you take challah with a bracha. Who else passing this way? The Shach, the Taz, the Losh, the Gra, everyone. Everyone. I looked around. I couldn't find anyone who argues with this, and the only one who seems to argue is like the Beis Yosef mentioned is the Smag. And the Beis Yosef himself says that Lavdafka, maybe that's not what the Smag means, and it's just saying Urcha the Milsa. The Gra says Beferish that that's not what the Smag means. Lamaisa the halacha is in such a case you take challah with a bracha. Why it was said in the shir that in such a case you take challah without a bracha, I don't know. Um, but the halacha is that isa that's asur lechalik after it's baked, you take challah from it with a bracha. The lamdus of it is the achrenim say geshmaka koda that because the chiyuv of challah is chal b'shas gilgul. When you're kneading the dough, that's when the chiyuv of hafrashas challah descends upon the dough. B'meila, by the way, if the dough, so it says in the Yerden Simon Lamed, if the dough at Bashas Gilgul belongs to a guy, then even if later it's sold to a yid, there's no chiyuv challah. So if you buy a pre-made dough from Trader Joe's or from wherever else with a hechsher, obviously, and even if you buy a few doughs and you combine them to make a shir challah, you don't take challah from it because Bashas Gilgul it belonged to a guy. So when b'shas gilgul it's asuya lechalik as dough, so then we rayna kilu kvar mechulik. Piskazuta the chalas lachem the archenim speak about this, but if it's only acher afia, the since b'shas gilgul it wasn't asuya lechalik, it was only asuya lechalik acher afia, so acher afia doesn't make a difference. It's not called asuya lechalik. B'shas gilgul it was an isa that was mechuyuv in hafrashas challah. Befrat derechag, I want to mention that the Ravid argues b'chlal the whole din of asuya lechalik. It's good. We don't pass on like the Ravid, but definitely acher afia. Everyone agrees that it's a chiv in challah with a bracha. Okay. That's it for hafrashas challah. The final thing I wanted to discuss could be my imagination, but it seems to me that in the last couple of weeks, the volume of shilas that have to do with blood spots and eggs has increased significantly. Maybe it has to do with bird flu. I don't know. So I think it's kedai to go over some things, some important nekudas, especially since again Purim and then Yom Tov coming up, a lot of cooking could be very relevant. Blood in eggs. Blood spots that are found in eggs. Not going to go into everything, all the lumdus and all the machlekes and Rishonim in detail, but the kids are. The Gemara tells us in Krisus that dam beitzim is mutter. There's no problem with it. The Gemara tells us in Chulin that dam beitzim is aser. So there's a stir between two Gemaras, and because of the stir in the Gemaras, there's a big machlekes Rishonim that comes out of this, because obviously the easiest way of resolving the stira is that the Gemara in Krisus is telling you midaraisa. Midaraisa, it's mutter. The Gemara in Chulin is saying midarabanan. Dam beitzim is aser midarabanan. However, there are some Rishonim who learn that no, how they explain the Gemaras, the sugyas. We're not going to get into, but they say no. Dam beitzim, depending on where it is found on the egg, kasher chelmin, the chelmin, wherever it is. There again, many different shittas. It could be an iser daraisa. That being said, Rav Rishonim paskin that dam beitzim is aser only midde Rabbonim. However, the Mechaber in Shulchan Aruch in Yerden Simon Samachvav paskins that dam beitzim is aser midde Eraisa. Like, not the only place where the Mechaber paskins like what seems to be a minority view of Rishonim, but L'maisa Ein lanu ela divrei Shulchan Aruch. This is how the Mechaber paskins. However, the Rama over there in Sif Dalid is mashma from the Rama that he holds that dam beitzim is usher only mid the Rabbanon, and the truth is it's not a really such a big raya that he holds that it's usher mid the Rabbanon, because Sif Dalid over there is talking about the tarevis, a mixture. Once the eggs are already mixed together with other things, so then the Paiskim say, the Taz and others, Marshal, that once it's mixed with, even if we consider dam beitzim de'eraisa, once it's in a tarevis, we are makel to consider it a derabanan. And also Tzemach Tzedek in the Piskadinim in Yerdes and Tzemach Vav is argues very, very strongly to the tzad that bechlal, the whole thing is an issa derabanan. Now, what does it help us if it's an issa derabanan? Issa derabanan is still usher. Yeah, so this is not to be mizalzel in an issa derabanan, chas v'shalom. What it does help us is it helps us with certain kulis that we can be makel, especially when it's already mixed together with other things. Now, not going to get into all the details. There are different scenarios how it could happen based on mashvuris bekaira, based on matrufis bekaira, if it's with other eggs, if it's with eggs and other things, min b'minim, min b'she'enim minim, batal b'reiv, batal b'shishim. But the reason I'm mentioning it is to raise awareness of the fact that there are many ifanim that we could be makel, because we hold that lemaisa it's an issa derabanan, especially when it's mixed together with other things. Now, all of this is talking about fertilized eggs. This whole machlekes Midares and Midarabanan is talking about fertilized eggs. Most commercial eggs that are sold today are not fertilized, and it's not only that they're not fertilized, is they don't have a potential to be fertilized, because they come from chickens that are raised in coops. They're stuffed together with hundreds of other chickens. There's no rooster in sight. There's no access for a rooster to get in there anywhere, so there's no possibility for them to be fertilized. Some such eggs in halacha are called, and Gemara calls them beitzim, the safna ma'ara. They don't come from the fertilization of a rooster. Rather, they come from safna ma'ara, means the heat of the ground. Whatever, they come on their own. Blood found in such eggs, l'kulei alma, is not a nissa deraisa. It's only a nissa of ma'arasayin. So therefore, the minig is to al pi halacha, you can just take out the blood and eat the rest of the egg. The minig is to discard the whole egg. Fine. What has become popular lately, before we go on, so the whole discussion that we mentioned earlier about tarevis, about the beitzim shvuris bekaira and trufis bekaira, and when it's mixed together in a batter and in a cake and other things, all those complications only begin by regular fertilized eggs. By most regular commercial eggs based on the safna ma'ara, there's no problem. The ikar din, you could take out the blood once it's already mixed together with something else. If it by mistake didn't take out the blood, that's not an issue at all. Halachos kama v'kama if somebody didn't check. If you didn't check, al pi halacha ikar din, there's no chiyuv to check eggs. Minig is to check eggs anyway when possible, but ikar din, that's why hard-boiled eggs don't have to be checked, because it's not possible to check them. But when we're cooking with eggs, the minig is to check them. But if somebody didn't check them, for sure by regular commercial eggs, there's no issue. What has become popular lately is free range or cage free or organic eggs, and there's a common perception that such eggs are not regular commercial eggs. They're not beitzim the safna meyara, they're regular fertilized eggs. Now, the truth is, there is such a thing. It's not very common. There is such a thing that's called, it says on the carton, fertilized eggs. This is pasha. This is regular eggs that the Shulchan Aruch talks about, and all the chumras of dam beitzim that are discussed in Shulchan Aruch apply to these eggs. However, based on my limited research, the whole idea of free-range, cage-free eggs is much more of a marketing gimmick than an actual thing. And I'll explain as follows. Regular commercial eggs, like we mentioned earlier, are produced by stuffing hundreds of chickens into a little tiny coop and basically just using them as machines to produce eggs. Chickens don't have any space to move. They don't have any space to spread their wings. They don't live very long. It's a real tzar l'chaim, and there are a lot of people who are not comfortable with this. So therefore, others came up with the idea so you can sell eggs that are called free range or cage free. But the truth is, there is no FDA definition of what is called free range and cage free. Even if the chicken has 2 feet of space to move in a concrete enclosure, that's considered free range. Sometimes even if there's a window somewhere in the chicken coop, that's also considered free range. So therefore, it really depends on the farm. This doesn't mean, I'm not saying, very important to emphasize, I'm not saying that all free range and cage free eggs are regular commercial eggs or safna me'ara, you don't have to worry about it. It really depends on the farm, and it depends on whether you're able to verify or not. Organic eggs are a little bit more serious. Organic eggs, taka, they're allowed freedom of movement. Lavadavka doesn't mean that there's a rooster on premises, which again, just because there isn't a rooster on premises doesn't make them automatically safna me'ara. They're very extreme requirements. There has to be no rooster within 60 houses and no bridge and no possibility at all for a rooster to get in there, even if in a very far-fetched way. The Gemara tells us in Maseches Beitza actually, and the Pri Chadash brings it in Yerden Seven Samach Vav. But it is still possible that even if they're called free range or cage free, they're still in an enclosure with no rooster, and they're still could be considered safna me'ar or akapanim suffix safna me'ar. Again, I'm not saying this to say that now all cage free and all free range eggs are all of a sudden okay, but it is something that if it is worth, if the situation comes up, it is worth looking into more to see if you can verify taka what's going on, if it's really free range or if it's free range as a marketing gimmick. Just yesterday, I was in the store and I was looking at eggs, and I see there are 5, 6 different types of eggs. Some of them are called cage free. Some of them are called a regular egg. Some of them are called free range. They're all basically the same price. Maybe the cage free are a dollar or two more because in the cage free you can sell them at a premium. And then there's one type of eggs that says on them that they grow on a small family farm. Here's where the farm is, and they graze freely next to cattle. And these eggs are precisely double the price of all the other eggs. Now, this makes sense. These are real free. It's not cost efficient to make eggs like this, so that's why that's what they're twice the price. So these type of eggs, you can clearly see that this is not just a marketing gimmick that they're cage free. Obviously, it's somewhat of a marketing gimmick, but these eggs really are coming from a place where you have to at least be chayshish that they're telling you the truth and they really graze freely on a farm with other cattle. They're not in an enclosure. Once they're not in an enclosure, it's already very hard to say that they're called safna me'ar. Because, like I said, the Gemara is very machmir. There has to be safna me'ar. There's no possibility, as facts fake that the rooster is able to get in there. But once there's any possibility, it's already not safna me'ar. But in a regular, it's just because it's called free range or cage free. The bottom line is just because it's called free range or cage free doesn't mean it's necessarily the end of the world. It's worth looking into more, and to, if something comes up, not to automatically throw everything in the garbage, but to consult your local Orthodox rabbi, because especially since in any case maker, then a lot of times if it's a tarif, if it's mixed together, there is room to be makel. So it's definitely kedai to ask and to look into more before just assuming that everything has to be discarded. And one last point is that, like I mentioned earlier, because me'ikar adin, a lot of poskim hold that the whole dam beitzim is only aser midrabanan. Therefore, a poskim say that what do we consider a blood spot? A lot of times you find in eggs are brown spots. Brown spots are never a problem in eggs. Why not? Because Peskim learn that from another area of halacha where we're concerned with the color of blood, it's hilchos nida, and In Hilchis Nida already, a lot of Peskim are makel that brown is not is a tahor color, and that's why they're Isa. So even though over there are chelkim, there are those who are machmer by eggs, where a lot of Peskim say it's anyway the whole thing is midrabanan. For sure, you could be makel that brown is that the color brown and blood spots and eggs is never a problem. The truth is, Pesachim say even more that even a light red. Uh, okay, I'm not going to get into that, but just putting out a shaila letesefes iyon that by lechera by nida we have a limud from a pasuk damah that there are chameshes minidamim. But by eggs we don't have such a limit. So how can you learn out from nida? Nida you have a special limit from a pasuk that says only chameshes minidamim and not other types. But by eggs lechera all colors, even the light colors, even the Deim and Adea, Kamemi Tilson, Kamemi Basar Tzali, whatever the categories are in the Gemara and Nida, Dafitas, by eggs should be Aser. Leave that as an open question. However, by brown spots, which the whole side of the kula of brown is that it's not Noitel Adim Klaus, Machal no Shaykhis to red. So therefore, it's never a problem. The color brown is never a problem in egg spots. And if you see them, you don't even have to remove them. But for sure, if you remove them, it's for sure fine. And with that, we will conclude, and everyone should have a kosher and freilichen Purim.